we love to expose ourselves to blue lit technology right before we go to bed, which wrecks our circadian rhythm because blue light jacks up your cortisol, because you're essentially telling yourself whenever you expose yourself to blue lit technology, unless you're wearing blue blocking glasses, you're essentially telling your body that it's noon. So the cortisol levels are going to ramp up, which is inherently going to inhibit melatonin production. So it's going to make it more difficult for you to fall asleep, much more difficult to get into deep sleep. And I'm sure you and your audience knows very well how important sleep is for growth and repair and recovery, the whole body, but especially the central nervous system. So yeah, that's really the only reason why red light therapy even exists or is even a necessity today, is because, again, we're living in this world of malillumination where the majority of people just aren't getting enough nourishment from full spectrum sunlight.
You're listening to A New Way of Living with Dan Voss, inspiring you to a new life of breathwork, cold therapy, nature, and plant medicine. Before we get into today's episode, I'd like to invite you to the Biohacking Congress in Miami this October 16th and 17th of 2021. You can get 50% off on-site tickets and live stream admissions with promo code HACK50, that's HACK50, at biohackingcongress.com. It's going to be a life-changing weekend with more than 25 famous speakers on biohacking and 20 health companies, ecological products, digital health devices, and solutions for your health optimization. Again, head over to biohackingcongress.com and enter code HACK50 for 50% off tickets. I'll be there in Miami in October, and I'm really looking forward to this conference. In this week's episode, my guest is Dr. Mike Belkowski. Dr. Belkowski graduated from the University of Montana's Doctorate of Physical Therapy program in 2016. Months later, he started his own private outpatient practice, which is thriving today because of his holistic approach to physical therapy by integrating unique treatments such as dry needling, cupping, blood flow restricting training, hyperbolic oxygen therapy, and of course, red light therapy. Impassioned to provide his patients with the most effective and efficacious treatment techniques, Dr. Belkowski is bringing that same dedication and enthusiasm to the red light therapy industry by providing the highest quality and safest devices, and even more importantly, educating the masses on the countless wellness benefits of red light therapy and how to properly utilize this healing technology to achieve effective, real results. Now more than ever, people are taking health into their own hands and searching for effective, holistic tools and treatment options. And based on the 10,000 plus peer-reviewed research articles, Dr. Belkowski fervently believes red light therapy is a must for anyone looking to optimize their health and longevity. Mike, welcome to A New Way of Living podcast.
Dan, appreciate you having me on, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I can just tell with what I have read in your bio that you have found something that you're really passionate about. And there's something really exciting about that in life when you discover something that you can pursue a career in and kind of go all in. And I can tell that with what you're doing with Biolite and red light therapy. So I appreciate you joining me on the show today. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person in Miami at the conference that I mentioned earlier in October. So before we kind of get into some of our questions around red light therapy, what it is, the benefits that it has for us, why don't you start off telling us a little bit more about your story of how you got interested in red light therapy and how it led you to where you are today?
Definitely. And I just want to say thanks for having me on, Dan. Really appreciate it. And looking forward, like you said, meeting you in person down in Miami. It's going to be a good time there down in at Biohacking Congress. But yeah, so the origin story of Biolite is kind of, it can be long-winded, but I'll try to make it succinct yet eventful. So like you mentioned, I'm a physical therapist by trade, graduated in 2016, and quickly got a local job at an outpatient clinic in Missoula, Montana, where I was born and raised and where the University of Montana is. And when I graduated from PT school, I had zero intentions of starting any type of business, but it only took a handful of months, 3, not even 4 months of being in the allopathic medical system for it to really leave a bad taste in my mouth. And the main reason why is because when you treat an allopathic model, regardless of if you're a physical therapist, a nurse, a chiropractor, what have you, you're relatively handcuffed by the insurance companies. And what I mean by that is, if you are a clinic owner and you're using insurances, certain types of treatments are going to get reimbursed more, even though they may not be more effective or efficacious or useful for a particular patient. My point being, if I know there's this other treatment, but it's not going to get reimbursed as much or at all, but I know it's more effective for the patient, well, the clinic owner and the insurances kind of dictate that you should do this other treatment because we're going to get more cash flow, we're going to keep the doors open, and that's what you need, of course, when you're running a clinic. But I knew there had to be another way. I didn't see myself living in this allopathic system for decades and decades. And like I said, it only lasted a couple months, and I didn't really like how it was, how I was able to treat patients. So coincidentally, around that same period, I ended up getting certified in dry needling, which this is an important point as it relates to red light therapy in a second here. But with dry needling, you can treat so many different types of aches and pains and whatnot quickly, and I mean within one treatment. The real results, spontaneous relief, or instantaneous relief, I should say, and the results are real. It's not like they're throwing on a Band-Aid, I'll see you next week, and I'll see you next week, and I'll see you the week after that, and so on and so forth. It's the real results. I can have patients that walk in with acute pain or chronic pain. It can be chronic headaches, migraines. It can be lower back pain from 20 years ago. And within one treatment, I can easily reduce it by 50%, sometimes 80, 90, or 100%. And that's the power of dry needling. And that's because dry needling significantly reduces inflammation and improves circulation, which again, we'll get to red light therapy and why that's important. So I was blown away at how much dry needling could do for patients. And I'm like, why don't more people know about that? So I opened my own cash-based PT practice, really predicated on dry needling. And it was cash-based because that means I'm not taking insurances. Thus, I can treat how I want to. I can seek out and learn about holistic treatments and whatever treatments I feel are most efficacious for my patients. And so that's how I kind of accumulated those holistic treatments, if you will, that you mentioned, the dry needling, cupping, blood flow restriction training, and hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So for a physical therapist, that's pretty holistic. Albeit for like a functional medicine doctor, maybe that's pretty normal. But the point being, when I was going through this process of learning about all these different treatments, I inevitably came upon light therapy or red light therapy, which I had heard of before through various podcasts, specifically Ben Greenfield. And I thought it was cool, the mechanisms were cool, and when he talked about it, it made sense. But I was like, well, it's light therapy. What can it really do? But when I read a book on it, and it's behind me, perhaps if you're watching the video, I can't, the red light therapy, the white one right there, by Ari Whitten. The first part of the book, it explains about the mechanisms of how red light therapy works, which we can talk about. And then the second half was about the research. And there's 10,000 plus clinical studies showing the multitude of benefits, whether it's skin health, hair health, energy, pain, mental health, thyroid, and we can go on, of how red light therapy can potentially help with those, health conditions. And when I was reading this book, and I especially reading about the mechanisms, the two big ones are reducing inflammation, improving circulation. And so that was a huge aha moment for me personally, just because of my experience with dry needling, and I knew how powerful and beneficial and effective dry needling was. And so kind of like when I first learned about dry needling, here I am reading a book on red light therapy. I had the same aha moment of, if red light therapy works this well, if it's this potent and beneficial and safe and effective, then how come more people don't know about it? So that's when I looked at the market, see what I had to offer, because I was kind of interested in getting a product myself. But there were kind of two ends of the spectrum in the market. On one end, you had pretty cheap products with, you could argue, you kind of get what you pay for as far as cheaper results, and you don't really know how safe those devices are relative to other ones. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have very expensive devices. Does the price really justify, or is the price justified based on the specs that they're offering? And then you also have to wonder about the safety specs there, ironically, because when I started Biolite after looking at the market, the ones that are most expensive actually also integrate Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, which significantly increases the EMFs, which we can talk about in a bit.
Yep.
But back to the market. So there's this massive void where I thought if someone could come in, offer a superior product or superior products for a more affordable price, that the demand would eventually be there as red light therapy becomes more and more popular. And so back in early 2019, that's when I decided to take the plunge into the red light therapy industry, figuring out ways and seeking people that could help me develop products again that were superior in specs and safety, and again for a more affordable price. So that was kind of how Biolite came to be.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love that story. You mentioned that, and I think we maybe talked about this either beforehand or you were talking about how there's still a vast majority of people that have either not heard of red light therapy, or if they've heard of the term, they wouldn't be able to explain what it really does and how it works. And even in the wellness space, I feel like, people talk about it, they see it on social media. But can you walk us through the mechanics of that and what's really happening when you use red light therapy? Sure.
And so, especially if you're in the biohacking realm, you're going to have a greater understanding of mitochondria, likely. But just a quick kind of learning lesson on it. Of course, when we're back in school, we learned that the mitochondria are the quote-unquote powerhouse cells or powerhouse organelles of the cell in the body, which is true. They produce our energy in the form of ATP, those little tokens of energy. So that is true. But recent research, especially in the past decade or so, specifically from who is considered the top mitochondrial researcher in the world, Dr. Doug Wallace, who's probably not far away from earning himself a Nobel Prize. Sorry, brain fart there. But so anyway, Dr. Doug Wallace has shown definitively that the mitochondria not only are important for energy, but they dictate our overall health, wellness, and longevity. And that's because between his research and others, they've proven that the more dysfunctional mitochondria you have, and keep in mind mitochondria are in every single cell in our body outside of red blood cells. They can be hundreds per cell, thousands per cell, tens of thousands per cell. So they can be very dense depending on how much energy that certain tissue needs, like the brain, heart, muscle, which takes a lot of energy, so they require more mitochondria. But the point being, the more dysfunctional your mitochondria are, the more likely you are to have a dysfunctional cell, which leads to a dysfunctional tissue, which leads to a dysfunctional organ, which is where you see people come up with these types of tumors and cancers in particular organs. And of course, you have enough organs fail, you're going to be very sick and eventually die. And Dr. Doug Wallace has gone on record as saying that upwards of 80% of modern diseases are due to dysfunctional mitochondria. So if we kind of reverse engineer that, the more robust, the more healthy, the more functional you can keep your mitochondria, and red light therapy is one way you can do that, then you're going to live a much longer, healthier, more vibrant life than your counterparts who do not take their mitochondria into consideration. So the reason why red light therapy works so well for mitochondria is because there's an enzyme, a chromophore, meaning it accepts light energy on the mitochondria, called cytochrome C oxidase. And it specifically is excited by red light and near infrared. So it doesn't include blue light, it doesn't include mid infrared or far infrared. It's specifically red and near infrared light. So that's why when you look on looking for a product, it's those two spectra of light that are always in combination in one form or another, meaning different types of nanometers. But so when the chromophore cytochrome C oxidase is excited by light, then it releases some nitric oxide, and when you have more nitric oxide in your blood, you get that nice vasodilation, which means better blood flow, more oxygenation. You're able to get the nutrients in and get the garbage or toxins or whatever you want to call it out more easily, and that's with the lymph system as well. So right away you're getting better circulation, and then there's a handful of mechanisms that helps drive down inflammation. And inflammation is not a bad thing. Of course, we need it as a red flag saying, hey, something's going on here. So you don't want to cut off inflammation totally, but you want to normalize it. You don't want to have systemic or chronic inflammation, because that's where you start to see all these different health conditions crop up, whether it's pain or osteoarthritis or even mental health, neurodegeneration. Rampant inflammation, of course, is not a good thing. So you want to modulate it, and that's what red light therapy does. So even just those two mechanisms alone, again, kind of like dry needling, by reducing inflammation, improving circulation, you're already putting your body into a better place for it to grow, regenerate, and repel any type of parasites or bacteria or viruses. So in other words, it's going to boost your immune system as well. But then what red light therapy has, of course, on dry needling is that it boosts the effectiveness and the health and the function of the mitochondria, which, as I explained, makes a massive difference in your present and then your long-term health, wellness, and longevity.
Sure. Wow. So I think I mentioned this before we started recording. A few big things that I'm into personally, and what I like to talk about on the podcast is cold plunges, cold therapy, and grounding. I'm a big fan of grounding, getting your socks and shoes off, walking on, barefoot on grass or beach or wherever that's connected to the earth. When we're doing that, whether it's cold therapy or grounding, are we getting the same thing from when we do red light therapy in terms of reducing inflammation? You also mentioned increased blood circulation. Is the same thing kind of happening there? Can you explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's kind of yes and no, and I'll tell you why. So let's start with the cold plunges, and one of the main reasons why those work so well specifically for your mitochondria. Of course, there's many other benefits. You can increase fat loss and all that good stuff, improve your vagus nerve stimulation and all that, but specifically to the mitochondria. And this is where it gets a little deep in the science, but very interesting, and where the rubber kind of meets the road. So when you expose yourself to cold, whether it's through air or these chambers, or more effectively just pure water, because that's how you're able to transduce cold most easily. But you force your mitochondria to produce heat. And so when the mitochondria get stimulated and they're having to force more or produce more energy to produce heat, they release infrared light. And this is important because the mitochondria are surrounded by biological water. And if you're familiar with the fourth phase of water with Gerald Pollack, which is an interesting book. Yeah, structured water.
I actually had him on my podcast last year. Yeah, he's a fascinating guy.
Yeah, brilliant.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, that's cool to hear. So our mitochondria are surrounded by water, and digging even into the mitochondria, there's electrons that are being shuttled constantly, which eventually produces our energy and water. So if your mitochondria are dysfunctional, the space between these respiratory proteins, and there's 5, so electrons go from respiratory protein 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5. And as your mitochondria gets more dysfunctional, those respiratory proteins stretch out, or their distance increases. So as the distance increases, you lose more and more electrons between every respiratory protein. The point being, when your mitochondria releases infrared light, it shrinks water, because think about it. If you put water in a freezer, what happens to the water? It expands. And so the complete opposite of that concept is if you heat water, it shrinks. So again, back to the cold plunge or cold exposure, if you're forcing your mitochondria to produce this infrared heat to warm up your body, because now you're making it cold, the infrared light is inherently shrinking the water, or shrinking the distance between those respiratory proteins. So again, you're making the electron shuttling from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 much more efficient. So thus you're producing energy more efficiently. And what's amazing about the mitochondria is, like I said, they also produce water. So they're surrounding themselves in water, which allows them to go through this process more efficiently. So
cool.
So that's kind of an interesting part of what cold exposure does. It literally makes your mitochondria more efficient at producing energy. But also you have the mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning you're increasing the development of new mitochondria. And that's important because as you can develop more and more mitochondria, provided they're functional and you're not reproducing dysfunctional mitochondria, then you're going to increase your mitochondrial density, which as we age, the density inherently goes down if you are not doing things to augment the health and function of your mitochondria. So not only are you making your energy more efficient, but you're also increasing the amount of mitochondria and thus the mitochondrial density.
So interesting. I love how connected all of these things are. I mean, we're talking about Gerald Pollack in the 4th phase of water. We're talking about cold exposure, grounding, red light therapy, and they all have commonalities for our health.
Well, and not to interrupt you, Dan, but I have a fleeting thought, and I don't want to let it pass.
Please.
And that's because we're talking about inflammation as well. And what I think people may not know, and I didn't for a long time, is that inflammation is an aggregation or an influx of protons. So the more protons you have in an area, the more acidic it's going to be. So on the flip side, like you're talking about, we're talking about cold exposure, we're talking about light, we're talking about grounding, we're talking about drinking some hydrogen-rich or some structured water. All of that is inducing electrons into your body, which is alkaline or alkalinity. So again, that's why light works so well. That's why grounding is anti-inflammatory. That's why cold exposure is anti-inflammatory, because you're bringing in electrons into your body, which is thus going to lower the ratio of protons to electrons, meaning you're going to reduce inflammation. And so that's really one of the key aspects of improving mitochondrial health, is finding all these ways to improve or take in free electrons. And again, the more electrons you have, the more electrons you're going to be feeding through your mitochondrial electron transport chain, meaning you're going to be able to produce more energy more readily. So the grounding, free electrons; cold exposure, free electrons; walking along the ocean, you get those negative ions. So it's all these different ways that the electrons are coming into your physiology that are able to reduce the inflammation that way.
That makes sense. Really cool. I want to flip back to the spectrum of light. We were talking about the difference between red light and near infrared. Can you tell us what the difference is between the two and how they relate to, let's say, your products at Biolite? Hey guys, I want to take a quick second to tell you about Kion, which provides natural supplements and clean coffee for vibrant health. Kion coffee is in the top 3% of all coffee grown worldwide that can claim to be specialty grade, which means it's free from yeast, pesticides, mold, and mycotoxins. It's also one of the best cups of coffee I've ever had. Kion also has a really great aminos product that aids in better sleep, post-exercise recovery, provides fast, clean energy, supports fasting, and improves cognitive performance. Experience the energy and performance benefits of Kion Aminos today. To get 15% off your order of Kion coffee or any of their products and supplements, visit getkion.com/Dan Voss and enter code Dan Voss, that's DANVOSS, at checkout for 15% off your order.
Sure. So red is literally the visible spectrum, meaning when you see red light, it's red light, right? And so that's from about 600 to 700 or so nanometers. Near infrared is invisible to our eyes, at least. So on the surface, that's how they're different. But also, red light doesn't penetrate any deeper than the skin surface. So if you're trying to treat anything below the skin surface, let's say muscles, tendons, joints, bones, organs, brain, you must incorporate near infrared, because the near infrared is what penetrates deeper than the skin. And that's because red light is a shorter wavelength than near infrared. And if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, on the far left side, you have UV light. So that's very, very short. So that's why UV light only damages the skin. It doesn't damage anything below because it's so short it can't penetrate. And then we get all the way to the other end of the visible light spectrum, which is red. But then on the right side of that, so on the longer end, we have near infrared, mid infrared, far infrared, and then beyond. So that's why infrared saunas are so beneficial for detoxification and improving your circulation and cardiovascular health, is because mid and far infrared are even longer than near infrared. But like we talked about before, the cytochrome C oxidase only responds to red and near infrared. So I get the question all the time, what's the difference between, red light therapy or saunas? Which one should I do? But that's kind of like comparing apples and oranges because they're completely different health benefits. And I always tell people, in a perfect world, you want to be incorporating both on a consistent basis because they both have their own physiological benefits and health and wellness benefits. So on the surface, that's how red and near infrared are different. But again, red and near infrared are what the mitochondria specifically respond to. So when you look at the market for red light therapy products, everyone basically has the exact same spectra of red, which is 660 nanometers. And then most people incorporate the 850 nanometers for near infrared. And for the time being, that's because that's what the research shows is most efficacious. But I think as the research comes out over the years, I think we're going to be able to fine-tune different spectra even within red. Like, let's say 640 works way better for skin and 650 works way better for scar healing but again, red only works for the skin and wound healing. But even if we go into near infrared, maybe 870 works really good for sleep. 890 works really good for anxiety and stress. 840 works really good for bone healing or muscle healing or what have you. So I think as the research goes on, we're going to be able to get much more defined and specific with different spectra of light. But at the end of the day, just exposing yourself to these two wavelengths are very beneficial because we live in a society in modern day with technology where we rarely go outside, especially compared to our grandparents and great-grandparents. I mean, they were outside all day. They're getting this full spectrum sunlight. And so we're living in this world or modern day world of mal-illumination where we're not getting enough full spectrum sunlight. And conversely, we're exposing ourselves to far too much fake light or non-native light, this bright white light or this blue lit technology. And the kicker is the timing that we get this light. We love to expose ourselves to blue lit technology right before we go to bed, which wrecks our circadian rhythm because blue light jacks up your cortisol, because you're essentially telling yourself whenever you expose yourself to blue lit technology, unless you're wearing blue blocking glasses, you're essentially telling your body that it's noon. So the cortisol levels are going to ramp up, which is inherently going to inhibit melatonin production. So it's going to make it more difficult for you to fall asleep, much more difficult to get into deep sleep. And I'm sure you and your audience knows very well how important sleep is for growth and repair and recovery, the whole body, but especially the central nervous system. So yeah, that's really the only reason why red light therapy even exists or is even a necessity today, is because, again, we're living in this world of malillumination where the majority of people just aren't getting enough nourishment from full spectrum sunlight.
Yeah, you brought up some really good points there. The first being that we just don't get as much natural sunlight as we did as our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. And that's why, especially someone like myself living in Chicago, half the year it's pretty dark and cold. So that's why in Montana, yeah. That's why during the summer I try to, get outside as much as I can, especially just, I'll take my shirt off and go for walks because otherwise I'm just not getting that exposure that's needed. Even this morning, I went across the street to a park and did yoga, breath work, meditated, and it was within the first hour or so of
And I'm sure you did that with bare feet.
I did with bare feet, and there's a lot. I mean, it was kind of a nice package of a lot of things there, right? I mean, the yoga and breath work, meditation, those are things I've been doing for a while, but then I had bare feet with the grounding. It was about an hour after the sun was rising, so I'm getting some good natural sunlight early on in the day. You were talking about circadian rhythm that helps to wake with the sunrise, fall asleep with the sunset. So there's a lot going on there. You also mentioned with timing. Is there a specific time that people get more benefit out of red light therapy throughout the day? Is it better in the morning, in the evening? Does it even matter?
Yeah, that's a good question. It gets asked a lot. And in a nutshell, no, it doesn't matter, other than you need to figure out if you are a person that gets energized or relaxed by red light therapy. And you can be both, but typically people are kind of one or the other, and that can change as you use red light therapy. But my point being, you surely wouldn't want to use red light therapy within an hour of going to bed if you get super energized. And depending on what you're doing that day, like if you have an important meeting or presentation or something, you might not want to use red light therapy first thing in the morning if it's going to really relax you and almost like sedate you. So that's just something you have to figure out by using it and seeing how your body reacts. But otherwise, unless you're specifically going for circadian rhythm, meaning like first thing in the morning, last thing at night, timing doesn't matter. It's just what time do you have available to use it? If so, then use it whenever you are, just so you're using it consistently and it's part of your habits versus thinking it has to be at a certain time and you miss it this day so you forget it, and then you miss it the next day and you forget it. So all of a sudden it's difficult to get into that consistent routine. So I always tell people, whenever you're able to on a given day, and you don't have to use red light therapy every single day. That's another point. It's not a more is better type of situation. In fact, less is more, because I think people get into the mindset that, if I do 10 minutes and I'm getting these results, well, I must do 20 minutes. Or instead of doing 1 treatment a day, I should do 2 treatments a day. But I think people get, people who don't see results, I think, are just, their dosages are too high. And so there's something called the biphasic dose response, where it's a I'm trying to get the camera here. It's a bell curve. And so on the left side of the bell curve, you have dosages that are too low, meaning if they're too low, you're not going to get the benefits you're looking for. And I think that's few and far between. I think people are mostly on the right side of that bell curve, where their dosage is too high. And like I mentioned earlier, overdosing on light therapy, you're really not going to have any negative side effects. I think very few people may end up with headaches or fatigue or even nausea. But again, I think those are more detox symptoms, especially when they're first starting out. But back to the point of dosage, if the dosage is too high, again, you're not going to get the benefits you're looking for. So it's about getting that dosage that's within that part of the bell curve. And that's really why I developed the red light therapy treatment protocols ebook, is because I've been delving into the research and synthesizing as much as I can to develop the protocols that are in there, so people have a general dosage they can aim for with thyroid health versus skin health versus athletic performance. Because, for example, this is one I use often. Let's compare a skin health protocol, anti-aging skin health, to, let's say, anxiety, stress, depression, whatever. So for skin health, you would use red light only at about 15 to 18 inches away for 2 to 3 minutes, a handful of times throughout the week. Let's say 3 to 4 days a week. Compare that to that brain treatment for anxiety and stress and depression. You would use near infrared only, about 6 inches away, closer to 8 to 10 minutes, and closer to 4 to 5 times a week. So if you don't understand or have access or know of these protocols, you're going to use the general 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day, whatever people are telling you or whatever the manufacturer's telling you. But that's just too global if you're going for specific results or specific health and wellness treatments. If you're going for general health and wellness, you'll probably see some benefits, but I would still argue that if you get much above 15 or close to 20, that's going to be too much or too high of a dosage. So
got it.
I think it behooves people to know that there are specific protocols, or you do need a specific time or dosage, meaning joules of energy, that you need for certain health and wellness benefits. Not to make things more complicated. Like I said, I think if you use it for 5 to 10 minutes, 3 to 4 days a week, you're going to realize some benefits, especially energy. But again, if you're going for more specific, or you want to be as effective as possible, it does kind of pay to have those specific protocols.
Got it. And you mentioned something really interesting in terms of most people will see that they either get more energy from this or it'll help them relax. Do we know why that is? Is there research that has been done that can show why some people have one reaction that gets more energy and others will get more of a relaxing benefit from it?
No, I haven't really seen specific research on that. That's a good question.
Got it.
I think
that's fair.
My guess, or I would postulate that those that get energized have more dysfunctional mitochondria, or just mitochondria that aren't as efficient at producing energy. So again, when they get exposed to these two spectra of light, it kind of jumpstarts their, electron transport chain and producing the ATP more efficiently. And on the flip side, people that are more likely to be relaxed, I'm not sure specifically what the physiological reaction would be, but maybe it has to do with them not exposing themselves to blue light or bright light. So let's say they're doing it closer in the evening, they're replacing their blue light technology with this red light. So instead of inhibiting your melatonin, you're actually augmenting it, or you're not suppressing it. At least you're kind of suppressing the cortisol production, if anything. So maybe it has to do with this mismatch in the light that people are being exposed to. So when they start using red light therapy, it's almost like when you start a new diet. Let's say you start the keto diet, you see a lot of inflammation loss, you see a lot of water loss, you might see a lot of weight loss, and that's because of an elimination diet. You're eliminating a lot of toxic ingredients into your body. So I guess my concept with the light situation is you're getting rid of or abstaining from this blue light technology that could be ruining your circadian rhythm or ability to get relaxed, because you're not able to produce this melatonin as well. And that's another thing with melatonin, is we're taught that it traditionally is produced in the pineal gland, which is very, very deep in the skull, and you would need a laser or an implant into your brain for the light to penetrate that deep and actually stimulate the pineal gland. But the way the red light therapy is able to work so well is that you have this extra pineal stimulus, meaning you can actually produce melatonin in lots of organs, such as the skin, spleen, what were some other ones? Thyroid, thymus. So that's how you're able to realize some of these sleep enhancing benefits, is when you do full body red light therapy, you're stimulating all these other tissues and organs that can also produce melatonin outside of the pineal gland.
Yeah, that would make sense. I want to go back to, you mentioned EMFs, and there's two things here. Number one is, what can red light therapy do to offset some of the negative effects of EMFs? We have all of our devices, right? We have our phones on us almost at all times. We have laptops. We have our Wi-Fi, our 5G technology, Bluetooth devices, and headphones. We're living in a world that's increasing in exposure of EMFs. So what can red light therapy do to kind of offset some of those negative effects? And then the second piece to that is it counterintuitive? Should we be worried at all about EMF emission from red light devices? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So I guess we need to understand what EMFs are doing specifically to our mitochondria. And back to the concept of the respiratory proteins in the electron transport chain and the distance making a huge impact on how efficient your mitochondria are at producing energy. We need to understand that EMFs and so 5G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and the likes are dehydrating our body. They're dehydrating our cells and mitochondria. And one of the end results is that it actually increases the space between those respiratory proteins. So, in effect, you're, again, losing all those electrons between 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5. Thus, your mitochondria aren't as productive. They're actually becoming more dysfunctional. So that's, in effect, what EMFs are doing to our body at a cellular level. It's making our mitochondria more dysfunctional. And again, the more dysfunctional mitochondria you have per cell, the more dysfunctional cells you have. And the more dysfunctional cells you have, dysfunctional tissue, so on and on and on. But it all starts with the mitochondria. So the answer is kind of the same as far as what does red light therapy do in this instance? Well, again, red light therapy reduces inflammation, because if you're exposed to enough of this EMFs like we are on a daily basis, that is in some way going to increase inflammation, and again, increase protons in your body. And so you're going to, with red light therapy, you'll help drive down inflammation, but more importantly, again, you're going to be boosting and augmenting the health of your mitochondria, potentially reversing the dysfunction that has occurred, making them more functional. And so that would be the answer for a lot of things, like how does it help, thyroid health? How does it help brain health? At the root level, those are the three big things that red light therapy does. And so again, it doesn't change when we're talking about EMFs. And that's what baffles me about companies that include Bluetooth and Wi-Fi with red light therapy, because it's like taking 2 steps back, 1 step forward.
Yeah.
The pros probably outweigh the cons, but it's like, why?
Right.
We have enough of that in our daily lives. So
Right.
So when you're looking at red light therapy devices, that's one of the main things I tell people to look at is EMF emission. Look at how much is being produced. And if they're not listing it, then you have to wonder if it's even being taken into consideration, which it probably isn't, or they're trying to hide something. And so you want to look at EMF emission. You want to look at light flicker, and that's something Biolite has kind of brought to the red light therapy industry. I don't think anyone else is doing that yet, is where we've reduced light flicker as much as possible, because just like EMF emission, we're exposing ourselves to high rates of light flicker all day, because every one of our technology screens has an imperceptibly high light flicker that we can't perceive with our naked eye, but our eyes can, and it sends these mixed fragmented signals to our brain, because again, our evolutionary background is being outside in full spectrum sunlight where there is zero flicker. So when we're surrounding ourselves with all this technology, again, we're sending scrambled signals to our eyes. Again, we can't perceive it, but it's sending mixed signals to our brain. And that's why people that work in offices with fluorescent lights that have high flicker rates, they have chronic headaches, migraines, they get fatigued easily, low concentration, eye strain, even mood and behavioral disorders. So anything that's plugged into electricity has some sort of flicker rate if it's light. So it's impossible to have zero flicker in a light, but you can reduce it a lot. And so most of the devices on the market have flicker rates of close to 40 to 60 hertz, which is 1 hertz is a flicker per second. So if it's 40 to 60, that's 40 to 60 flickers per second, and even upwards of 100 hertz.
Wow.
And so with our panels, we've reduced it to around 1 to 2 hertz. So you're getting that 1 to 2. Again, you can't perceive it, but if you're going to expose yourself to red light on a consistent basis, again, it's just one of those things. Why submit your body and cells and physiology to more detrimental energy than it needs to? So Biolite has, at least at this point, the lowest light flicker on the market, and then up there with the lowest EMF emission as well.
That's really cool.
And then the last thing I would tell people to look for in a red light therapy device, although this isn't the end-all be-all, is you want to check out the light irradiance, which is measured in milliwatts per centimeter squared. And this is essentially like a term for light power. So the higher the light irradiance, the deeper that the light can penetrate, which is particularly important when you're treating anything that's deep, like bones, joints, the brain. You have to get through that thick skull. So that's one important factor with light irradiance. But the other one is, if you have a smaller device but you want to cover more of your body, well, of course you have to stand back to allow the light to spread, cover more of your body. But if you have a higher light irradiance, and as you step back, you're not going to be sacrificing nearly as much light irradiance compared to a device with lower light irradiance. Because with light, you lose light power or light irradiance exponentially as you get further and further away. It's not linear, meaning when you move from 1 to 2 inches, or I should say when you move from 2 to 3 inches, you lose a lot more light power than when you moved from 1 to 2 or 0 to 1. So again, having that higher light irradiance kind of gives you a little more leeway for being back, allowing the light to spread without sacrificing light irradiance.
Sure. And I think I was looking at your website earlier. You guys have 3 different red light therapy devices at Biolite. Is that correct?
Yeah. So within the last month, we've actually released 3 new products, and one of them is a mouthpiece. It's called the Guardian, which is kind of, it is a new product in the whole red light therapy industry. And so if you look at the research on oral health and red light therapy, it's actually flabbergasting how much there is. And so when I interviewed a biological dentist on my podcast, The Red Light Report, Dr. Kelly Blodgett, talking to him, listening to his knowledge and expertise, and just the impact that your oral health has on your entire body, your entire health and wellness. It's not just relegated just to your mouth and like take care of your health in your mouth because then your mouth can be healthy. Well, no, it actually impacts your gut health. And research has shown the healthier your gut, the more your brain's going to be healthy, and the more mental health you're going to have. And on the flip side, the more dysbiotic or the more dysfunctional your oral microbiome is, that's going to negatively impact your gut, which can negatively impact your mental health. And that's kind of like a two-way street both ways. So if you have poor mental health, it's a two-way highway to your gut, which can cause your gut to have a higher proportion of bad bacteria versus good bacteria, which then can negatively affect your oral health. So when you get into health, it's like, yeah, it's not a myopic or a one-size-fits-all for everything. But talking to Dr. Kelly Blodgett and looking through the research, it's like oral health is a very low-hanging fruit if you're trying to take care of your body systemically. So being able to release a red light therapy product specifically for the mouth was pretty exciting for us. And we actually just launched it yesterday officially. It's been on pre-order, but it's officially launched. And then the two other products that are new are just upgraded models of like the tabletop model and then the full body model of our red light therapy panels. And those have patent pending technology, as does the Guardian, with dual LED, meaning with all other panels on the market, including ours before this, every LED could only be red or near infrared. But with dual LED technology, each LED can be both. And this is important because when you're doing like an all red light or an all near infrared light, now you're going to have double the LEDs with that type of spectra. So if you're doing, let's say, just a full body skin treatment, now you're going to have twice as many LEDs that are red, meaning you're just going to have a more comprehensive, even spread of light on your body. And same with near infrared if you're treating a deeper stuff. So yeah, we've released those three products in the last several weeks, actually.
That's really cool. That's awesome. And for someone that's listening that is interested in red light therapy, I know we've talked about a ton of different benefits, from inflammation to blood circulation to sleep and immune system. There's all sorts of benefits from this. But what are some, like one or two, or maybe just the main benefit that you're seeing, whether that's in your own use or your customers or just people you're talking to in the industry? Someone that's listening today, they're thinking, this sounds cool, but what am I going to get from it? What are some of the first few benefits I'll see? What are you hearing and seeing in the industry?
I think most people, one of the quickest things they notice is a change in energy, because whether it's circadian rhythm or, again, dysfunctional mitochondria from EMFs or diet or what have you, when you're able to augment the mitochondria in some way, and red light therapy is very powerful, you're going to have almost a spontaneous or instantaneous boost in energy. So that's one of the big ones, is a change in energy levels. And then just inherently, the skin reacts the quickest, and a lot of people, especially females, of course, and I would say about 80 to 90% of people that buy lights or that I talk to that have lights are females, and they're getting it for anti-aging skin because they want to look good. I mean, who doesn't? So whether it's for wound healing or anti-aging, anti-wrinkle, red light therapy or skin reacts very quickly to red light therapy. It can take less than a week or a couple weeks, and you're going to notice a change in your skin. Whereas if you're dealing with chronic pain, it can take months before you realize benefits, but that's because chronic pain is so tough to treat. But that would be my third one, actually, is just pain in general. Whether it's chronic headaches, migraines, or someone that's suffered a motor vehicle accident and their back is just wrecked and they've gone through different types of physical therapy or chiro or meds, nothing really seems to help their back pain, but they start using red light therapy and almost instantly their back pain is reduced or completely gone. And so that was a really cool, and I talked to that customer for like an hour on the phone just because their story was so powerful. But that's the power of red light therapy, and it's real. And she didn't change anything else other than adding red light therapy to her regimen. And once she did, it was night and day, and her back pain was finally gone. So, not saying that's going to happen with everyone, but that's the potential of red light therapy, which is beautiful because it's so safe. It's you can do it in the comfort of your home. It's I would call it a low risk, very high reward piece of technology for your health, wellness, and longevity.
Yeah, that is so cool. Yeah, I mean, the more we're talking, the more I'm realizing all of the benefits. We've talked about so many of them, and I know you have a bunch more on your website at Biolite. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing all of that. Where can people learn more about Biolite and the work you're doing? You have a website, you're on social. Where can people go to?
Yeah, so the website is biolite.shop, which is .shop, and that's kind of the same name for Instagram, redlight.shop. We also have a YouTube video or a YouTube channel where I'm posting a lot of educational videos. We also post the videos from my podcast. So if you want to learn even more information about red light therapy, I would highly suggest reading about it on the website or listening about it through YouTube and visual. But then also, I have a lot of great interviews and solo episodes on red light therapy on my podcast, The Red Light Report.
Very cool. Awesome. I'll have that all linked up in the show notes as well. So, well, Mike, this has been a pleasure. I really have enjoyed listening to your story of how you got this started and the many benefits of red light therapy and a lot of the science is what I appreciate. And I know my audience will as well. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time and joining me today.
My pleasure, Dan. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope that your audience finds this information useful. Because kind of like I was telling you before we started the podcast, as much as the business is about selling stuff, I'm impassioned and one of the main missions of Biolite is to educate people on red light therapy, because people really do need to know and understand how amazing and impactful red light therapy can be for them, their family, their friends, and how easy it is. I know the listening to the science can sound a little complex, but it's very easy to use. And once you understand the basics, it's like a Swiss Army knife. You can use it for a cut one day, you can use it for a pain the other, you can use it to calm down. So it's just, there's so many uses that I think at some point in time, every household's going to have some sort of red light therapy device because it's so safe and it's so effective for so many things. So again, I appreciate you giving me the platform to educate your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you would agree, we've come so far in the last 5-10 years in terms of the research and just general awareness about red light therapy. But it's really exciting to see where it's going to go in the next several decades. And I know you're going to be a part of that effort. So cool, man. Well, I'm looking forward to meeting you, like we said earlier, to meet you in person in October at the conference in Miami.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one, Dan. I'll see you there.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
All right, you too.